Hey everybody, welcome back. It's me, Greg, from LeGrand Drain Cleaning and Pressure Washing, Gainesville, Florida. And in the last project, we put that vortex valve or inlet on that gutter vacuum. So what does that mean? That means I have a piece left over. What are we going to do with this? To find out, stay tuned. I'll tell you all about it after a message from our sponsor. Caution, you're about to enter the twilight zone. If you don't watch this video all the way through, you could seriously damage your machine. So it would behoove you to pay attention, even though I'm not the greatest video maker in the world. It's your choice. I'm back. As you can see, I used a long Phillips head drill bit in my screw. Make sure that you're loosening them, not tightening them, because that, if you're not careful, you will strip it out. These screws, there's 6 in the black head and 4 in the handle. They only go into, plastic things, so make sure you're undoing them counterclockwise. Another thing to remember, this is where your cord is, so when you put it back, but there's also a screw right there under the handle we got to take out. So let me go back and get my screwdriver. Also, I'd like to point out before I take this lid off, I have taken a black Sharpie and put little lines, one on the blue and one on the black, because I'm really not sure when this lifts off which part comes off. I think just the black part comes off, but I don't know. So we've taken that last 7th screw out of there, and we should be able to lift this off. Now, keep in mind I got switches here, so let's see what's going on here. It's getting hung up on something. Oh, I got to slide that down because that's still attached. So we'll slide that down the thingy. Now let's see what happens. Okay, there you go. We're just going to set that off to the side because this is still attached. You can see these are all on there by quick connects. Later I may go and just do something to waterproof those a little bit. I'm assuming that some little bit of water comes up. So this sits here, so that means it exhausts from this big hole here. See, these are the exhaust fans right here. So theoretically I should be able to put a hole right on that side like we were talking about. All those will come out of that exhaust vent. There's more screws here if you want to take those apart and get in the motors, but we're not doing that. These are little grates that protect the impellers inside those 3 fans or motors. So I don't need much to do with this. And I may have to disconnect everything to drill my hole in this. Let's get on the other part of this project. Alrighty, welcome back. So the next part of this project is I will need to make a template for this. So I have already used my X-Acto knife. And you can see over here on the top of this box, I already cut one that was too small, so I just cut another one. But basically, I held this thing down and traced around it with an X-Acto, and I had a piece here somewhere. Here it is. Now this doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but what it does need to do is it needs to be large enough to fit in here to cover those 4 screw holes, because we're going to put our finger here and really press on those to make an indentation. And hopefully when I lift this thing back up, I'll know exactly where those screw holes are, because that's the most important part when we use this, is to see those. I can drill those out now. See those little indentations? I can drill them out now and know exactly where they are. So when I put this on here, over on the other side that's large like this, I'll kind of glue it or tape it in place and drill my holes. And then I've got to find a keyhole saw that just fits over this to make this hole large enough. To drill these out, these holes right here, I used a little bit oversized bit. I wanted to make sure these holes are large enough so that when I'm looking at it, you can actually see where the screw holes are. Now when I take this off and tape it up in place, I'll use a small pilot bit to go down the center, then I'll use a little bit bigger drill than another one because that's a thin-walled drum. And if you try to do a big bit, you know, it'll like bend the metal and be real hard to get through. So do a pilot, then go a little bit bigger. It won't be as big as this bit when I'm done because these screws aren't that big. I'll drill those holes just big enough, you know, for these screws to get through so that I have, you know, the head. You know, if I drilled holes that big, the head would go through, obviously, but I wanted to make them big enough so I could see them. And when I cut this out, I just set this down on the, I set that down on the cardboard. I trimmed around it with the X-Acto knife, and then I trimmed it again. It doesn't matter if it goes all the way to the edge. And then when this was full, I set this on top and held it in place, and I used the X-Acto knife to cut around the inside of this hole, and then I slowly, that's why it kind of looks ugly, trimmed it out. And I got to find my keyhole and my drill, and I'll drill through that plastic the same way. I'll glue this in place, and then I'll drill me a little hole, and I'll drill me a little bit bigger hole, and that way I don't have to worry about it, you know, busting that plastic up. After digging around in the boxes, I finally found my hole saws. That's a 2.5 inch hole saw, so it's on there pretty snug. So when it actually cuts in, it'll make it just a hair bigger, but that's just right. So keep that in mind. Well, what we have here is failure to communicate. My brain wasn't communicating with this vacuum. So I put this lid back where it's going to go, and duh, this is kind of in the way. I can't really cut that because if you cut that, then that would break the integrity into the thing. So when you do yours, I want to. No, honey, I'm talking to the video people. So you may want to put it way over here, up as high as you can go. You can't put it here because it's rounded, and I was focusing more on the round than I was, unless you put a really thick gasket maybe. See, because that would kind of sit weird. So you may want to make sure yours is up as high as it can go. So since that's like that, it'll still, there's all kinds of air around the side and up the top. I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut that part flat. Okay, Redneck Greg is back, and I used my favorite saw there to cut this out, which you should use a jigsaw or something. I didn't mess up there and tack off that little bit, but it'll work. So be careful not to cut the frame like that, not to saw off that little piece of the screw thing. And I'm going to use some gasket material, so I should be good to go in my little experiment. I'll buy another one of these later, I guess. And this is what happens when I get in a hurry to make a YouTube video. I have to apologize for the vacuum cleaner, but my wife has decided to join me. So now you can see I got this big hole up in there, so I should get plenty of airflow because I'll get it from the sides and from the top. Just remember, when you do yours, mount yours up a little higher like that. You'll get even much more airflow. This should be good. And I think also, when this is sitting up just a little bit, when I put the sealer around this, it'll pick it up just a hair, give me a little bit more as well. All right, just to ensure that I'm even a little more on the cheesy side, I made this nice gasket out of cardboard. So it's cut out so that these 4 holes will be accessible, but obviously, so then that sits like that. So let's install this and see what happens. If you're a special child like I am and you've cut those little stands off in there to screw your screw into, you can buy a screw like this, little self-tapping screw. I think it's a number 6, and it's long enough. It's about 1.25 inches. That's 1.25 inches. You can get 1.5 inches. You can see right there. But anyways, once you stick it up in the hole, it seats really good like that. So I'm going to do another one over here. I got to get a longer one for this side, but you can actually reach in here and put the screw up and guide it to the little hole if you reach through like that. So that problem is solved. Just don't cut those off to begin with. Now that I've got my temporary gasket in place and everything's secured good, I'll trim that off later with a knife or something, or maybe put silicone. It's time to put these 7 screws back in. Keep in mind you've got to line it up. You'll feel it in place, and set your drill really low so that you don't over torque these and strip out the plastic. This is where a magnetic tip really comes in handy. Mine's not magnetic, so if yours is not magnetic, make sure it's big enough to, you know, wedge into that screw, because you got to go down all the way into the holes without knocking it off. And then you hear that because I set it real low so I don't strip it out. Now bear in mind, guys, this next step after I get all this together is we got to find a way where this exhaust to close that off. This is where you need a PhD, or at least a master's in mechanical engineering, because you can tell this is highly engineered to the 20th degree what I'm doing here. So if you ain't up to snuff, you ain't educated, you may not want to try this at home. Don't forget, when you go to put this handle back on, you slide this back up and you put it in that little slot there before you put the 4 screws in. Alright, so our next task is to seal this up where it exhausts from all the way around. Now I'd like to go to the store and maybe get some of that 1/2-inch pipe insulation that slid all the way down the length of it, and you know, you put it around copper pipe and then cut a piece that would go around and stick it up in there. But I'm not going to go wait at the store, because in my little town it's 2 people at a time in the store, and it took me an hour and a half just to get the stupid screws I showed you. So we're going to use the redneck's friend, that's right, duct tape. Now in this here neck of the woods, we're all hard-working Americans, and we're all about appearances. Nothing says hard-working American like duct tape. I've got the generator cranked up and working. Got the old hose out. Okay, stick that in there like that. And find the end over here. Of course, I gotta do it the hard way. Just can't reach down and grab the end. Fire it up and see what happens. Okay, take 2. More duct tape, more power. Let's turn it on and see what happens. Oh, it's a lot quieter now. Hey, it's working. What do you know? Woo-hoo! But I don't think it's going to give me the power I want. Yeah, it's working, but not real strong. So in this experiment, I would say that is a dud. D-U-D-D, dud. Well, boys and girls, that was an epic $4 failure. What can I tell you? Sometimes things sound great on paper, but they just don't pan out. What that tells me is the 3 motors in this machine are designed to, you know, as they get more suction going on, they torque up more and get power to them, but the exhaust are really not made for a high volume pushing out, you know, loads of air. So even though they're great for sucking up the stuff, they're just not good for blowing out the leaves. But you know, sometimes you just got to try things to see if you can get, you know, more uses out of your equipment. So I'm real happy so far with this vacuum cleaner. Now I have to live life with a hole in the side of it, but you know, that's a choice I made. That's not going to hurt anything. You know, it's just an extra inlet sitting up there. Just looks kind of weird. I don't know, when newbies ask me, what's that there hole for? Maybe I'll tell them it's to plug in my nuclear powered gutter cleaning vacuum or something. Mess with their heads some. Alright kids, so the next time, subscribe, thumbs up, like, share the videos, use the links, and we'll see you later, Gators.